You're listening to The Mind Coordinator, your gateway to sports leadership on VSX Digital Sports Network.
I'm your host, the head coach and mind coordinator, Dr. David Schoonover, revealing the essence of coaching brilliance. Sit back and relax on the bench with me as I take you on a journey through the intricate minds of the coaches, executives, and administrators of your favorite sports stars. It's game time.
Get ready to embark on a journey of insight and inspiration. Here's your host, the head coach, Dr. David Schoonover.
As your ally in this process, I'm committed to helping you unlock the potential within your mind and cultivate the tools you need to thrive. Whether it's sports psychology, relationships, or career struggles, together we will explore the depths of your thoughts, unravel the complexities of your emotions, and map out strategies to overcome any obstacles standing in the way of your success. So let's embark on this transformative journey together, where every session is an opportunity for growth and every challenge is a stepping stone toward a brighter future. Welcome to the Mind Coordinator. Let's begin.
You're listening to the Mind Coordinator with Dr. David Schoonover on KSHP, AM 1400, 107.1 FM, and VSX Digital Sports Network. Skip your cable bill this month and join the action with JB and Fubo TV. Get 7 days free, 15% off your first month. No credit check, no deposit, no installation hassle. Go to FuboTV.com/JB. Sign up, download the app, and start watching games.
Enjoy being a subscriber after the first month. Easy cancellation anytime. Regional restrictions apply. Sign up at VegasScoreboardExpress.com.
Located only 4 miles from downtown Colorado Springs and 10 miles from Pikes Peak, Hyatt Place Colorado Springs Garden of the Gods offers spacious rooms with contemporary decor, stylish furnishings, including divided living and sleeping areas, the Hyatt Grand Bed, state-of-the-art media and work center, a 42-inch flat-panel high-definition television that easily integrates with laptops and other electronic devices. Complimentary breakfast is included during your stay. Location at 503 West Garden of the Gods Road. Book your stay at HyattPlace.com.
I'm your host, the head coach and mind coordinator, Dr. David Schoonover, revealing the essence of coaching brilliance. Sit back and relax on the bench with me as I take you on a journey through the intricate minds of the coaches, executives, and administrators of your favorite sports stars. It's game time.
You're listening to the Mind Coordinator, your gateway to sports leadership, hosted by Dr. David Schoonover on VSX Digital Sports Network.
All right, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mind Coordinator. Today, in Session 2, we're going to continue our discussion on the topic that affects us all, mental health. Today, we will have an honest and insightful discussion on understanding, supporting, and prioritizing mental health and the well-being of not only the student-athlete, but of coaches as well, and how we can foster a culture of positivity and support. Coaches serve as role models for their players, both on and off the field. In today's society, coaches are expected to prioritize their own mental well-being, demonstrate healthy coping strategies, and advocate for mental health awareness and destigmatization. By modeling positive attitudes and behaviors, coaches can inspire and empower their players to prioritize their mental health. Mental health profoundly affects coaching players in today's society in several ways, such as understanding and support. Coaches need to have a deep understanding of mental health issues to effectively support their players. But how? There's a growing recognition of the importance of mental well-being, and coaches are expected to be knowledgeable about mental health challenges and strategies for supporting their players. Coaches must be attuned to their players' mental states to optimize performance, identify potential barriers to success, and provide appropriate support and resources for mental well-being. Athletes face increasing pressure and stress from various sources, including competition, media scrutiny, and personal expectations. Coaches play a critical role in helping players manage these pressures, build resilience, and maintain mental well-being in the face of adversity. Mental health influences team dynamics and cohesion. Coaches need to create a supportive team environment where players feel comfortable discussing mental health concerns, seeking help when needed, and supporting each other's well-being. Positive team dynamics contribute to a healthier and a more successful team culture. Effective communication is essential for addressing mental health issues and coaching players. Coaches need to foster an open and honest communication channel with their players, build trust, and create a safe space for discussing mental health concerns without fear or judgment of stigma. Keep in mind, the greatest problem with communication is the illusion that's taken place. Coaches must be adaptable and flexible in their coaching approach to accommodate the diverse mental health issues of their players. This may involve modifying training methods or providing additional support resources or adjusting expectations to ensure the well-being and success of each player. Coaches require ongoing education and training on mental health topics to effectively support their players in today's society. This includes understanding mental health disorders, recognizing warning signs, and implementing best practices for supporting mental well-being and knowing when to refer the players to get professional help. All right, it's my pleasure to introduce today's guest, guys, a true expert in the field of coaching. Drew Gladstone is currently in his third year as an assistant coach at Northern Illinois University in the Mid-American Conference. He previously worked at Indiana University and was a high school head coach in Connecticut, where he won 2 New England championships. Drew also founded and ran a basketball academy in Connecticut, which provided player development, camps, clinics, and teams for young players. Drew played at DePaul University and grew up in New York and Connecticut. With years of experience and a passion for the game and player development, please join me in extending a warm welcome to our guest.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Well, thank you very much, Drew. Good morning. And thanks for joining us today. I appreciate you making the time to give us your perspective on mental health from a coach's point of view. As we all know, mental health is a worldwide topic, right? Everybody, especially when it comes to sports. Coach, you're involved in all aspects of Husky basketball, including acting as a recruiting coordinator along with player development, practice planning, game strategy. So I want to start today with the recruiting aspect of it. Give us some insight on some of the elements that you're looking for when you recruit a prospective player.
I think, obviously, on the surface level, it starts with talent as a basketball player. So I think that's the easiest thing to spot. You watch film, you watch players live, and you can see if the talent is there, the potential is there, the size, the skill, the ability to dribble, pass, and shoot. I think diving deeper is where we really kind of, earn our keep. So what type of mentality do kids have? How do they deal with adversity? Can you watch a kid play a game that is a tough game for them? How do they react when they're hit with some adversity? How do they react with their players? How do they, how does that change the team dynamic? So I think for me, an element of toughness and grit, especially when kids are faced with adversity. I would also say, a big thing is just watching how they interact on and off the court with their teammates, with their coaches. When a coach talks to them, are they giving them eye contact? Are they not? Are they responding? After the game, who are they addressing? How are they addressing people? Even something as simple as having a phone conversation with a recruit. How are they responding to you? Can they have an engaging conversation? I think at the end of the day, college athletes are going to be faced with a ton of adversity, especially in today's world. So, when it gets to that point, you have to see on the front end, how are they going to be able to handle that? Are you going to be able to articulate certain things? Are you going to be able to communicate how you're feeling, what you're going through, and how we can kind of come up with solutions? So I think the biggest thing for me is just seeing what type of substance kids have. Does basketball mean a lot to them? Do they like it? Do they love it? How much are they putting into the game beforehand? I think a lot of kids, in today's society, they expect it's kind of the microwave deal where they think everything's going to come easy. But I'm looking for kids that, have really spent time. And obviously that doesn't guarantee success, but I know when things get hard, they're going to have something to fall back on, and they're going to have a body of work that's going to build confidence for them rather than, just assuming somebody's going to tell them, hey, everything's going to be okay. So I don't know. I kind of went on a little bit of a tangent there, but I think it's much more than just the basketball.
No, it's absolutely needed. You're not really on a tangent. You have to talk about all those things. There's a lot to it, and just from the recruiting standpoint, Drew, culture and climate from both the perspective of the athlete's home and the university come into play when making decisions to have a potential player join the team. You can't do a whole lot about the existing culture and the climate of the athlete's home, right? You go in there, everybody's got their Sunday best on, right? But for a culture to adapt and thrive, there needs to be a leader who's aware of the need to actively adapt and then reevaluate the culture if the team is to constantly move forward. So I guess the question is, who's in charge of building your culture, and how do you go about applying and adapting it?
Yeah, I think, it starts with the leadership. So obviously our head coach has to, articulate and talk about what it, not just what our culture is, but, what it looks like from a standpoint of your habits. What do you do every day? What does it look like when you walk into the gym? So I think culture is probably like the biggest buzzword in college sports or sports in general. I think the best ones really, really define it in terms of actual actions and not just kind of philosophy. So it starts with the coaches. Your head coach has to kind of define it. The assistant coaches and the staff have to follow suit and live and breathe it. And then, it takes accountability for guys to implement it. And like I said, for us, culture, just for an example, culture is team and togetherness. So are we in every huddle? Are we, locking arms and staying together, or is it a separated group? And you got to enforce that every time. And sometimes on the front end, you have to, be deliberate with that stuff, and you have to be very pointed and hold guys accountable. And the guys that embrace it will do it. The guys that won't, you can kind of weed out. But I think it starts at the top, and then you hope that your team leaders, maybe your captains and your older guys, can really start to take it on themselves and enforce it. And then hopefully, the game is changing now where you could potentially have a new team each year, but you try to see carryover with veterans and guys that have been in your program, especially players. And once those guys can carry it on and really start to implement it, then things are taking place. I think when it's a coach-led team only, you're probably going to run into some problems. When the players start to lead and enforce what you're trying to do as a culture, that's when I think, you're going to have some success.
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah, for sure. So can you give us an example of how some of this has been applied?
Yeah, I think, again, just like the recruiting, the basketball piece is easy, per se. I think the non-basketball is really what you need to focus on. And I think some of the best teams, spend a lot more time doing things as a team together off the court than on the court. So for us, we're going to spend a lot of time, number one, getting to know each other, and knowing each other on a deeper level. I think when you can create a level of vulnerability amongst your team and understand what individual players have gone through or are going through or where they come from, it becomes easier to fight for those guys and invest in those guys' future. So we'll do some things like sitting down together, just giving your general background once we get together, but then talking about, potential things that have hurt you in the past, what we call like scars. What are your scars and kind of how they molded you? I think that's like a specific exercise that we've done that's been really powerful because it gets guys to know each other on a different level, where in today's society, especially with young kids, vulnerability is seen as weakness. For us, we have to know those things. We have to understand those things, not only as coaches, but as teammates too. So we know, better understand what our teammates are going through when things get hard and kind of where they go to and where their minds go to. So I think things like that and team activities that are off the court, that get guys to communicate and talk and have meaningful conversation are really, really important and are things that really start to kind of break down walls and build those connections.
Coach, thank you very much. I could not agree with you more. There's far more to the individual athlete, female or male, than meets the eye, right? You see the guy making free throws all day long, but you don't know that he's got a problem with anger. You don't know he's got a problem with thinking what could go wrong every 10 seconds, those kind of things. So getting to know them internally is extremely important, right? We look at sports these days, and everybody looks at the external, right? Can the guy run 100 meters faster? Can he throw a ball? Can he kick a ball? Can he put one in the, can he make a three-pointer? But we don't really spend time internally with these guys. And it's such a stigma to be able to go get help, right? It's just ridiculous.
Absolutely.
At the Lighthouse Sessions, that is my business, It's a standard. I require all my clients to do what's called self-actualization. Basically, Abraham Maslow. So it just refers to just one's full potential, right? And a desire for personal growth. It's not really desire for making the coach happy. It's not really desire to score the most points, but it's personal growth. So when it comes to player development, I know you're really big on this, which is wonderful. What strategies do you employ and how do you apply those to bring out the best of your players?
Yeah, I think, I think everybody thinks of player development and they think of, skills and drills and training and being on the court. And, what I've seen and what I kind of believe is just, player development is 360 degrees. So for us, it may probably even more the mental than the physical. And it starts with, like we talked about, being able to have that open and honest communication with the guys you're working with. So, for me to get the most out of a player, I really have to understand who they are, what their motivations are, what are their fears, and kind of, what their goals are. And if you don't know that and you're just purely going with the basketball piece or the training piece or the physical piece, you're not going to get the most out of these guys. And I think, in my, history, I think I've gotten the most out of players personally, from, just talking with them and getting them to see things that maybe they can't see on their own, explaining things in a certain way, building confidence, which is obviously twofold. I think you earn your confidence through your work on the court, but understanding that you do that is important too. So, conversation, understanding guys, motives, their fears, trying to break down those walls. And I can't do that all alone. Utilizing, third parties and getting kids to talk to other people is really important. Whether it's a professional or just somebody that's going through a similar experience. But I think, like you said, player development it's the court, it's the mental, it's mental performance, which is obviously, kind of a huge thing now. Mental health, obviously, as well as building your body, gaining confidence through your physical development, and then maintenance of your body, making sure you're staying healthy and safe and building that up, because I think it all goes into getting better. And I don't think you can get better as a player if you're not also getting better as a person. And I'm nowhere near a professional like yourself, but I just think understanding that is a huge step in the right direction.
Coach, I couldn't agree more. And what you said is just so profound. I wish that a lot more coaches in the sporting world would adhere to that. It's just it's so important. Coach, how do you know, when you're talking to your players and you're working with these guys, how do you know these players are living their life 100% true to themselves?
Honestly, I think you can tell how a player lives his life based on his habits on the court. And it starts there. I think if guys are constantly trying to skip steps or take shortcuts, I think that's a direct indication of how they're living their life. Obviously, in our business in college basketball, we're going to spend a ton of time around our guys, traveling, training, practice, being on the road, et cetera. So we get to see it like a little bit more in depth. You can take a look at a locker room and tell a lot about a guy. You go locker to locker, and some guys have a clean and orderly locker, and some guys have their stuff all, out, jumbled up in front of their locker. So I think you just have to have your antennas up and, be open to seeing those things. Communication. If I text you, can you text me back? Can we have an adult conversation? Or do I have to, chase you down to get a response to get you to do what you're doing? So I think there are a lot of telltale signs. As you do this more and more, you start to see them more and more. But I'm a true believer that, you can't compartmentalize, greatness or, success. I don't think you can be as good as you can be as a basketball player if you're not being as good as you can be as a student, as just a person, as a brother, as a teammate, as a son. I just don't believe that. And there's obviously some kids that are super talented and they can get by, but I think as time comes on, it always catches up to you if your habits aren't in line with your goals. Yeah,
absolutely. Again, I'm just, I think I'm taking notes. You're doing great, Coach. This is wonderful. Absolutely love it.
Good.
Coach, as we all know, the vast number of these college sports, it could be any sport. Most of these young men and women, they'll never play professionally, right? And the number of those who it's minuscule, it's just a small amount. But from a player development standpoint, how do you prepare a student athlete for the reality of life after college sports?
Yeah, I think, it starts with education, like you just said, the reality of, maybe not so much that like nobody's going to get a shot, but even if you do get a shot, you're going to end up, your post-playing career is going to be longer than your however long you're living now. So, just number one, education. And then two, we have to do our job as, collegiate basketball coaches and, in the academic world to make sure guys are getting their education and valuing their education, getting degrees. And, I think guys that value learning and value getting better in other ways in life, again, you're going to find better players. You're going to find better teammates. So again, going back to the recruiting piece, are we going to, be able to find guys that, hey, I love basketball. I want to make basketball a career for myself, but I'm also interested in business. I want to be a business major. And I don't know. I think sometimes maybe you'll find a little bit of dip in talent and guys that can do both. But I think at the end of the day, those are the guys that are going to help you win games and create strong cultures and strong teams. So, we have to do our job and making sure guys get their education. We have to hold them accountable, make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do in the classroom. And sometimes that's not just doesn't equate to like, hey, I want to be a business major. I want to, go into marketing. It's teaching guys how to get up and go to work every day. Sure. Can you be consistent on a daily basis and show up to practice and, show up not 10 minutes before, but an hour before, get yourself ready, get yourself treatment, get taped, get some shots up and stuff like that. So just the general principles of life and how you get up and go to work every day.
Yep, that's wonderful. Coach, we got to pause for a minute. We got to go pay some bills. When we come back, we're going to have more of Coach Drew. Thank you so much. Hang tight, guys.
You're listening to The Mind Coordinator, your gateway to sports leadership, hosted by Dr. David Schoonover on VSX Digital Sports Network.
In times of war and peace, the men and women of our military dedicate themselves to serving our country. We salute those who have given their lives for our country. Their sacrifice will never be forgotten.
This salute is courtesy of Mac and Grill Cheese Factory, serving our area with quality and pride. For a fantastic meal, stop by 1331 West Warm Springs Road in Henderson or call them at 725-214-4140. That's 725-214-4140. Mac and Grill Cheese Factory, on the air reminding everyone that we live in the land of the free thanks to our brave.
You're listening to The Mind Coordinator, your gateway to sports leadership, hosted by Dr. David Schoonover on VSX Digital Sports Network.
All right, we're back from break. We're talking with Coach Drew Gladstone, and we are just having a wonderful conversation. The coach has got some really great information for us today, so I want to thank you again in advance, Coach. Coach, a lot of these, and I've seen this throughout my career with working with professional athletes and working with college athletes, that it's really kind of a pet peeve of mine, because I see it happening over and over and over again. It's this coddling from high school, right? And these kids are told how wonderful they are, and they're in a small little community, and maybe in that small community they are superstars, right? Then they go to college, and all of a sudden that level of competition is a little different, right? All of a sudden, these guys are a little better, right? But again, in college sports, the guy who's got the talent, he's getting coddled. You're wonderful. You're great. You're the best, right? And the egos are going crazy. So then they go pro, and things go south. And one of the guys I was thinking about the other day was Vince Young in Texas. Arguably one of the best quarterbacks that played college ball. He was coddled. He was told how wonderful he is. They're a national champion. Right? He goes pro. He has a couple of good years. All of a sudden, he has a couple of bad games. Throws an interception or two, and he gets booed. The moment that happened, Vince Young lost it.
Yeah.
And from there, it was horrible. It was a lot of money, great player. And no, I'm not really trying to pick on Vince. I'm just using him as an example. This happens all the time. And the truth concerning this mental health in sports is there's such a stigma in seeking the help that you need. A lot of players see it as a risk. They may be ostracized from the team, or they just neglect it, and they really need the help. Had Vince Young been with somebody that wouldn't necessarily tell him you're not Superman, but let's examine the cores. What are your core emotions? Why do you act and react? What does your super ego make you do things and the behavior that we can change? I think if somebody would have worked with Vince, he might have had 1 or 2 Super Bowl rings. So when your experience here in helping these players get the help they need, first you have to notice it, and secondly, you have to make sure they get the help they need without the stigma that goes undeservingly along with it.
Yep.
How do you go about that, Coach?
Well, I think, it's hard. It's hard, recruiting. You're doing everything you can to entice a player to come play for you. And let's face it, a lot of people run from the truth. So, I don't say you want to lie, but you have to find a balance between, telling kids what they want to hear and telling kids what they need to hear. And you have to kind of take a risk. Whereas, hey, I might lose some guys, but maybe those are the guys that I don't really want in my program, or I don't, aren't going to help us win. Now, you're going to deal with that regardless. There's always going to be doubt. There's always going to be, a level of uncertainty with these kids, especially as they transition from level to level. When you go from high school to college, deep down somewhere, there's going to be some, thought about, hey, what if I'm not who they say I am? So I think you have to address those things. Anytime there's something to address with players, you have to talk to them about it. And then I think you have to just preach in front of a group and in private that, like, you guys have to be truth seekers. You got to run the truth, and you got to embrace it. And anything that you're not, comfortable with, let's attack it and let's be open and honest with it. So, like, it starts with building relationships where you can kind of build trust with your players. And then get them to kind of be vulnerable, like we talked about earlier, whether it's in a group setting or one-on-one, and just address those things. Now, obviously, way easier said than done, and I think you uncover a lot of that after you get players, but it's something that's absolutely real. And it's, probably like an epidemic with student athletes. Like you said, they're coddled at the highest level, and, it's hard. We look at these kids, and, when they don't make it, I think our natural instinct is to criticize, but the game has changed. 20 years ago, you have a bad game, maybe it's in the newspaper, a couple of days later. Now these kids go to the locker room and they pick up their phone and they're getting criticized immediately. With social media, especially at the higher levels. So to deal with that is something that most people, I don't care who you are, you're not equipped to deal with. So, understanding that and trying to help provide support, whereas, maybe just talking about it is one step, but utilizing sports psychologists and whatever resources you may have in your athletic department to, talk to players in a group setting. And then if they are open to it, or you can get them open to it, having one-on-one conversation. But we've done things like utilize third parties, us having different connections, our head coaches having certain connections. Maybe you can connect with a guy who works with NBA players, and you can make it a little bit more appealing to guys to just open that door, and then they can kind of, see the benefits of that. But you have to address it. You have to talk about it. It has to be a real thing, and you have to find a way for guys to kind of get comfortable with it. So it's a challenge. It's never going to stop, but it's a real thing.
Coach, it's like you don't have enough to do, right? I mean, you've got so much on your plate, and are we going to make time out so this guy can go talk to somebody? No, we're not. That's the truth. We're not. We've got school. You got to be with your tutors. You got to be with your nutritionists. You got to be in the weight room. You got to learn the plays. You got to practice. Repeat. I call that the hamster.
It's a job.
I call
it is a job.
Go ahead.
No, you're good. No, it's a full-time job, and obviously most, students will say, student athletes get everything and they're spoiled, and but it's it's an incredibly daunting task to go through a season. And, now the rules have changed where you basically you get your guys in June, you work with them for about 8 weeks, they go home for 2 weeks, they come back, and then you're on the court with them again as soon as they come back to school. And, your kind of season goes almost from June to March. And like you said, it's not only the basketball practices, but you got to go to class. You got to, you have your obligations, and, everybody's got their own stuff going on at home. So it's a lot. And I would say like the most, at the end of the day, the kids that don't kind of max out, I think that I would say one of the more sad experiences is when a lot of these kids have to go home and, they're not quite sure what to do. And, they didn't make it in the eyes of their peers, which typically, doesn't just involve getting a college degree. If you're a highly touted guy in high school, even not, so a lot of the people around you don't understand like how hard it is to be, in the NBA. And when you go home and you're not in the NBA, but you got your degree, and some people don't value that, like that can be a lot on these kids once it's all said and done.
Yeah, absolutely. I have, I've talked to a lot of coaches on this subject, Drew, and I'll tell you where I have found, now I'm just telling you what I found, that the coaches that are meeting with the sports psychologist or somebody and utilizing those the tools they have at the university, when coaches lead by example, I have found that the players find it much easier because at times they'll use the coach as a scapegoat. Well, Coach Drew's doing it. It's got to be good for him. We've heard some feedback. Right. Yes, I want to do this. But we have to make time. We have to identify it. We have to make time. And it's like, hey, where's Johnny? He's not at practice today. Well, you know where he is. But then again, the stigma that attached to it. It's just, it's horrible. And I feel really bad for a lot of these guys. Mm-hmm. Because, again, Vince Young. Here's another example, too. And this is just mind-boggling to me. You probably know this guy, Marcus Dupree, most sought-after high school football player in the country. Yeah. Goes to the University of Oklahoma for 3 years. 3. This is back when the USFL was coming in. Marcus went to sign a $40 million contract, and lo and behold, he's illiterate. He can't read. He can't write. He puts an X on the contract. So this brings me back to another very important thing about winning. It's all about winning. Your livelihood as a high school coach or a college coach or a pro coach, your livelihood depends on a bunch of young men performing.
Yep.
What did Vince Lombardi say? Winning isn't everything. It's the only thing. So you got a guy like Marcus Dupree, right? He's an incredible athlete. Now, that is just one small aspect. Another small aspect that's becoming really prominent, and it's kind of the dirty little secret. I mean, we have these behavioral norms, and sometimes they're suspended when it comes to sport, at least historically, right? And some of these coaches cross the line, Drew, when they interact with their players. You've seen it. I've seen it. We all know it exists, but we live in a culture, where people don't really understand violence or abuse outside of physical violence or abuse, right? If you see somebody walk in, they got a black eye, chances are they didn't fall down the steps, right? So most of the time, people are not taught to recognize the harm that's taking place until severe physical harm is in the picture, right? So as an example, in most workplaces, if you grab somebody by the collar and scream at them, chances are you're gone, right? Or there's going to be a human resource investigation of sort, right? Some of these abuse researchers have identified behaviors such as belittling, humiliating, shouting, scapegoating. How would Bobby Knight do today, in today's world, right? Right. So the question is, Coach, when does the tough coaching cross the line into abuse?
Yeah, I think part of it is number one, you have to know your players. Again, going back to the beginning, having meaningful conversations, knowing where kids come from, knowing what their motivations are. Obviously, you can't put your hands on a player. That doesn't work. Right. The physical is a clear violation of that. But as we know, and obviously the topic is the mental piece. What crosses the line with certain kids, and I think a big part is when it becomes personal. And I think a lot of coaches, like you said, coaches need education too. Coaches need to understand how messages are being sent. I think a great line you said, which I wrote down in the intro, was the biggest issue with communication is the illusion that it's taking place. You know, I think coaches, there's a ton of coaches out there that don't understand how to effectively communicate, and the fact that communication is different for each player. So, you know, I think number one, when you make it personal, that crosses the line. And two, when it becomes abusive in the sense of you're attacking someone's character, you're attacking someone's family or anything like that, is way too much. On the flip side, certain kids are motivated by different things. I might have to put my arm around you and just tell you something in a very monotone voice. Hey, you know, you need to do a better job. You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Other guys prefer to, you know, kind of get yelled at a little bit, and obviously in the right, you know, messaging, but some guys respond to that better. And I think you have to, again, know your players, know what they prefer, know what they respond to best. But a lot of kids would take that and go in a shell, and then there's no more communication. I worked with a strength coach, and he did a great job, and he was one of the best in the business. And his line was, you know, rules without relationships equal rebellion. And I always remember that. And, you know, it starts with creating those relationships and understanding guys. And if you don't have that, I don't care how you talk to a guy, you know, it's only going to last a certain amount of time.
Oh, that's for sure. Yeah. It's kind of a, you know, it's an obvious, but it's kind of like a dirty little secret with this winning. And they're going to do whatever they want, whether it's screen. And the coaches, you're right. I absolutely agree. The coaches have to be educated. They have to learn. Coaching in any sport, to be a coach, you are an expert in that game. That is your life. You love it. You breathe it. You eat it. It's your life. You're inundated with that sport, and you know how to make winners. You know how to be a champion. But the way that you go about that in these days is different. The coach may not change because winning is everything. And the problem, the way I see it, is winning has become so important to us in a culture because being number one is, well, it's erroneously equated with coaching success and competence, right? So whether it's in high school or college or pro, I guess at least from the college aspect, we've really kind of forgotten what our real message is, our mission is as a professional. Coaches have to. They've come to mistakenly believe that the win-loss outcome of their season is really just more important than the process of participation, right? Character development, safety of the athletes. If an athlete's performance failures are reflective of the coaching failure, that's not true, right?
Right.
We shouldn't feel this way when it comes to coaching at every level. It doesn't matter. It's just a reflection of the coach. So why should we feel this way when coaches are at the level they're regulated? They're criticized and fired for not winning enough. How many times do we see the pro? It's like a revolving door, right? You have a good year, you have a couple slow years, rebuilding, boom, you're out of here. And it's just shame.
Yep.
When coaches subscribe to this creed, Drew, when they put their needs to win in front of their athletes' well-being and learning, serious problems develop. Interactions with coaches who believe the process of teaching and playing do significant long-term damage to these athletes. When winning is more important to the coach than the experience of the athlete's participation, emotional, sometimes physical abuse are as a result, right?
Yep.
It's a shame. How have you seen that change through your years?
You know, I think a lot, you know, social media, you know, more televised games. I think that's kind of put things on a front page where it's harder for these guys to get away with things like that now. So like, I don't know if that changes mindsets, but I think it's just known that you can't cross the line in a ways that maybe you were able to in years past, and it's been put, you know, on the front page with you know, I think a couple of years ago, Tom Izzo in the NCAA tournament was, you know, getting after a guy, and it became a big deal. And I think his relationship with the player probably saved him at the end of the day. But if they didn't have that, maybe that's not the case. But I think, you know, with with topics like mental health coming to the forefront, I think that's helped a little bit. I think there's still guys that, hey, you know, coaches are professionals, but when you make that jump and, you're going from an assistant and you're making X amount of dollars and now you got, millions of dollars on the line, some guys can't handle that. And, the pressure to win and the pressure to be successful kind of, throws a couple things out the window. But I do think there's more of an emphasis on mental health, on player relations. And I think that's improved things. I just think, it's a tough business and you have to find that balance between, hey, I want to win, but I want to win the right way. And I'll tell you, I can't talk from experience because I'm not a head coach, but I know that's probably easier said than done. Everybody wants you to win. They want you to win now. A great coach the other day at SMU got fired after 2 years. And this is not, one of the greatest programs in the country. This is kind of a mid-level, high major program. And, he had no time to turn that thing around. So the pressure for your livelihood and your family and things like that can push guys over the edge. So it's a tough business, but at the end of the day, like you said, it is a business. So it takes kind of high level people to really be successful and do it the right way.
Certainly. And I think and you said it right, Coach, it is a business. But I think what people lose sight of sometimes that whatever sport it is an avenue of the university, right? So
yes,
it's not university first. We're bringing you to the university.
Absolutely.
To play sports because we can fill those stands and we can get on television and we get that revenue. And it's really a fine line, Coach. It really is. How do you make
Absolutely.
that balance, right? If you're which I'll just say right now, I feel that you'll be a head coach soon. But how does a head coach with all the massive responsibility, all the pressure, all the anxiety, how does he know that guy? How does he know? Because he's got assistant coaches. How does he know his assistant coaches? What does he know about them?
Mm-hmm.
Does he know? Now, at the Lighthouse sessions, through my testing, what I do, and I can tell, I like to use this analogy. Drew, if you were in Vegas and you had a 90 to 95% chance of winning every time you placed a bet, how often would you make that bet?
Yeah.
All day.
Yeah, you're good.
All day long, right? When I first meet people, and this is so sad, but it's true. They're going to tell you what they want you to know about them. Right? They're not going to tell you that,
mm-hmm.
They're not going to say that they got a 200 credit score and they live in the basement of their mom's home when they're unemployed. So through the testing that I do and the questions I ask before we have even one session, I can cut through all that noise and I can talk to that person and we can identify what the superego behavior is that people don't even think about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, and when they ask me those questions, I say things to them like, well, can you remember a time where you said something or did something and you went, oh gosh, I shouldn't have done that. That's superego. It's demanding you in a certain way, right? But you're on your best behavior when you're meeting these guys. So what I'm able to do with that is to understand what their course, how are they thinking? Why do they act? Why do they react? What's their go-to emotion? And it's very powerful and very eye-opening to that individual. I do a lot of counseling with couples, and it's the same way, whether they're married 20 years or they're married 2 years. They jump into these relationships, and everything's all glitter and gold until they start digging in, right? And I feel the same thing applies with the athlete, the student-athlete, man or a woman. They've got these oh gosh, I don't know what I call it. Not really delusions or illusions of grandeur, but more like I am so good and I'm going to do this and I've been told all this stuff, and they get there and all of a sudden the balloon deflates, right? Coaches don't know how to motivate them. They don't know what their go-to is. They don't know if this guy or girl is going to be really aggressive, and if you yell at them and pound on them and
mm-hmm.
Do all that kind of thing, that turns those folks on. They love that. They love conflict. The more conflict, the better they are. Take a look at a guy like Bill Lambier or Dennis Rodman. Those guys eat conflict for breakfast, and that was their thing.
Yeah.
Right? But the head coach, for a head coach, I would say, what does he know about his assistants? Is he hiring assistants based on their win-loss record? You bet he is. Is
mm-hmm.
he hiring them for any other demographic? He is. What does he know?
Yeah.
Right? Does he know that that Drew, as the assistant, is saying that if we give Johnny the ball on this particular play, because I know Johnny and I know what he does and I know how he's going to act, he is going to score. He is going to do well. The head coach may not do that, so I guess that responsibility falls back on you, right? The thing that I find that's very disturbing too is just the anxiety levels in sports for coaches, for fans. You got your favorite team, you're watching them on TV, and they lose with a field goal or a last-minute bucket, and the anxiety levels are through the roof. Seems to be the number one problem with student athletes these days. It seems to be the number one problem with professional athletes these days. But by the time, these kids are between the ages of 17 and 22, they're pretty much done playing sports, right? There's, like we talked about, there's only a small amount of these guys that will actually go play pro. And what we end up doing is, now what, right? We talked about that a minute ago. Well, their identity falls apart. They have not been, right. What's an easier way to say this? Instead of being coddled, they haven't been told the truth. Listen, Bob, listen, Jane, this is what's going on, right? And they haven't gone through. They haven't spent time internally. They've spent all their time externally trying to be the best they can in their particular sport, right? And they just fall apart. And what happens then is you've got 17 to 22-year-old kids, and it often comes in the healing process, or the remedy here is anti-anxiety or antidepressant medication. So statistically, the use of these meds really increases in men and women who've been involved in sports since they were young. Again, we go back to, you're a high school kid in your local town, and you're wonderful, right? We're destroying our kids with this type of motivation. We're destroying them.
Yeah.
So what do you think, Coach? What's your opinion on what we can do to change that?
I mean, I think it starts, number one, it starts at home. I think you have to have balance in terms of, what your habits are, what is being enforced at home. And, unfortunately, the recruiting process is, you're trying to convince somebody. But like I said before, you have to be a truth teller, and you have to convince kids that is what they need. And that is what they want to get better. And do not run. You got to surround yourself with people that are truth tellers, and not just people that are going to tell you what you want to hear because it makes you feel good. Because, like you said, I've seen it time and time again, and you can spot it a mile away when you start to have those type of real conversations with kids, and they shy away and they just move on to the next person. That tells you kind of who they've been around and who they want to be around. But the kids that want to be coached, have probably been coached by somebody that is honest but fair. And I think, just having more conversations like that with players, and not giving in to hey, I need to keep this kid. I'm going to have to lie to him. I need to keep this kid. I need to recruit this kid. I'm going to have to kind of take it easy on him. Because at the end of the day, I don't think that results in having a successful team and a successful impact on young people. So, it starts with adults. It starts with coaches. And again, easier said than done with what's at stake. But I think the quicker you realize that will lead to success within those players and within their lives, I think the quicker you'll see success in all areas. So it's like you said, it's a fine line. I don't know the exact answer, but I think it starts with just being honest and being truthful, and sticking with it, because I think you're gonna have a better program, you're gonna have a better team, and you're gonna have a better success rate for your student athletes, no matter what they do when they're done.
You're listening to The Mind Coordinator, your gateway to sports leadership, hosted by Dr. David Schoonover on VSX Digital Sports Network.
Vegas Scoreboard Express, Saturdays and Sundays, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Time on KSHP AM 1400, 107.1 FM, North Las Vegas.
I'm Dr. David Schoonover, your dedicated formation therapist. Feeling weighed down by life's challenges? Let's navigate them together. Whether it's sports psychology, relationships, or career struggles, I'm here to guide you towards clarity and healing. Take the first step towards a brighter tomorrow. Visit thelighthouseSessions.com or call 702-518-4393. Schedule your consultation. I'm Dr. Schoonover. Together, let's illuminate your path to your inner light.
You're listening to The Mind Coordinator with Dr. David Schoonover on KSHP, AM 1400, 107.1 FM, and VSX Digital Sports Network.
Yep, that is so true. You know, another thing that I want to talk on briefly, and thank you very much for that, Coach. The insight is really wonderful. We have this new thing called NIL.
Yep.
What are we doing? You know, some of these coaches, you're a head coach, anybody's head coach, right? They got a good program, whether it's lacrosse or soccer or basketball, they've got this great program, and these kids come in, and they don't like the coach. Oh, the coach yelled at me. Well, I'm just going to go somewhere else, and they're going to pay me. Well, most of these kids won't make that kind of money in the real world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mass amounts. So what are we doing here, Coach? Are we breeding entitlement? How do you see that play out?
Yeah, I think so. You know, I don't know if it's the NIL solely to be blamed on. I think like they changed the rules, and listen, you can be in a bad situation and you should have the right to get out. I'm all for that. But like you said, double-edged sword. It's also basically reinforce kids saying, hey, it's not me. It's the coach. It's something else. And I'm going to go somewhere else and things are going to change. And unfortunately, you know, kids have seen this, and you see this over the past few years where, you know, you don't produce at one school, you're not playing a ton, you go to another school, and it's the same situation. And again, it's about having people in your camp and around you that can tell you, you need to look in the mirror. You know, you need to self-evaluate and understand that, hey, this was your freshman year. You had an all-league guard playing in front of you. You need to train. You need to mimic what that guy's doing. You need to use this as a year to develop. And if you can get through that mentally and get something out of it, you're going to be much better off than starting over at another place. But again, people don't want to hear that. So I don't know the exact solution, but I think that's a big part of it. You can transfer now and, you know, seemingly you can play right away. So a lot of kids just run from that truth, run from the issues, and think they can start over somewhere else without looking within first. And I think that a big part of that is just, again, the people around you. The NIL obviously makes that even tougher because, you know, on the flip side, if you do produce, somebody's probably telling you, hey, you did a great job there, but you outgrew that. And sometimes you do. And who am I to tell a kid not to go get what, like we said, is life-changing money for them or their family, given the situation. But there's also a lot of kids that they did well for a reason, and they're with the right people, and they're at the right level, and they're being played the right way. And, you know, just quitting one job to go take another job for more money is not always going to result in success. You know, that's the real world, right? So it's forcing kids to grow up quickly, get some tough lessons, and it's putting an emphasis on who you surround yourself with and what type of, messaging you want. But I could tell you, it's making my job a lot harder.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that, regardless of sport, whether it's just your family, your children, I think you speak truth. I think that is the only way to go. Sometimes the truth is a hard pill to swallow.
Yes.
Right? It really is. And again, we've got these superstar athletes coming out of high school and going to college. They're just coddled so much that they can't handle it. What's the old expression? You can't handle the truth. Right?
Absolutely.
You know, it's been proposed that coaching effectiveness is it's mediated by the athlete's perception and recall, right? So overt coaching behaviors are perceived and given meaning by each athlete, and it results in an attitude towards the coach in the sporting experience. So you
Mm-hmm.
have these behaviors, this overt coaching. So you have coaches like Bobby Knight, extremely successful, kind of crazy. Probably wouldn't be allowed on a court today. But it's the
Correct.
coach, right? And that's that sporting experience. So could you give us an example, Coach, of maybe one of your players in the past that that had a really good sport experience with basketball, use basketball, and conversely, a bad experience with it?
Yeah. I mean, just in general, I would say the one thing, I think that some of the better stories that I've been involved are kids that perhaps weren't given the recognition early. Talking about the kids being coddled. I think, I coached a young man, started at the high school level, and he was kind of a, role player behind some better players. And when I came in contact with him, he came to a different school, and he got into a different role as more of a focal point. But I think his initial experience of being a role player, figuring out how to have an impact on the game without being that guy and without getting a play drawn up for you, and being in more of that humble role allowed him to have an impact no matter where he went. And he ended up, playing at the Division I level, playing on different successful teams where he had different roles, but he was always kind of humble in the sense of, he kind of came from that kind of different type of beginning and then became more of a focal point.
You're listening to The Mind Coordinator, your gateway to sports leadership, hosted by Dr. David Schoonover on VSX Digital Sports Network.